Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission meeting, recorded May 1st, 2019.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Thanks for coming, everybody, on this beautiful, rainy May 1st day. Happy May Day, everybody.
Happy May Day.
Welcome
Congratulations to all workers.
Right, exactly. All workers. Welcome to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission on this May 1st, 2019 meeting. And we will start with roll call.
Rourke,
Here.
Birnbach,
Here.
O'Mara,
Here.
Dugan,
Here.
and I will correct the name. I have already done that on the future agenda, so I apologize for that. Borski is excused. Corbin, absent.
Okay, we do have quorum. So we will move on to the next item, which is item 2. Persons who wish to address the committee for up to 3 minutes on a non-agenda item. I'll do it. You want me? Go ahead, please say your name and address at the podium.
Okay. I'm Tim McKnight at 2101 Oak Street. I got something here that would be very interesting, and it was put in the UWSP newspaper about April 11th. It says Evers' budget restores eminent domain for bike trails. And it's something I think would be very attractive, especially around Stevens Point, and adding new additions, and it could help the downtown, it would help the environment, and it's something would be, it almost would easy substitute for cars too. It also, and even you mentioned a few things too, Trevor, on the Common Council too. And it fits in much with this and so forth. I would like to read, you people would read this and see what you think of it. Yeah, go ahead. Read what you said. You bike enthusiastic guys like Dugan, Jennings. I want to hear what you guys, yeah, just send that right straight down and so forth. So
It was also for PED facilities, which was a big deal.
So,
yeah, I know, yeah, and I know the thing, and that's the thing, right. If you can get it through the properties, and they said that, and that's exactly what it says, exactly. You would have to talk with the properties and everything else, yes. You're gonna get arguments from people that you might get it, but it's still.
This goes to the Division Street project, because the way the statute was written, we couldn't have used condemnation to widen the street to put in a sidewalk or a bike path.
Yeah. So,
Great. Well,
so
yeah.
I thought I'd just bring it up.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that to our
But
attention.
if you want to.
Yep. And I believe that's part of the governor's budget and
Yes.
subject to approval.
yes.
So we'll see.
We don't, that's,
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that to our meeting. Are there any other non-agenda items from the audience or the commission? I would like to welcome Kathy Dugan, Commissioner Dugan, to our commission.
Thank you very much.
I know you've been supportive of bicycle pedestrian improvements over the years, so it's nice to have you on board, so thank you.
I think I was a part of the first bicycle advocacy organization in town,
All right.
a long time ago.
What year?
Ask Will Stites.
Oh, okay. All right. Great, okay. Any other non-agenda items? I think there was one. If you did miss it, there was a grand opening of the Schrader Connection, which is a new, pretty incredible corridor, a rail-to-trail, basically. A corridor that connects a bit of Whiting and essentially Plover residents to Stevens Point and vice versa. So if you haven't checked that out, if you're listening, thanks. If you're listening at home or reading the minutes, please do check that out and walk or bike that trail. So a nice transport corridor.
And it was.
I'm sorry, did you have another item? Go ahead.
Not exactly, but.
Name and address again, please.
Tim McKnight, 2101 Oak Street. Yes, they had a walk that was sponsored that day before at 10 o'clock in the morning. And there were a lot of people. And it was a nice day. And when everybody went down, absolutely, it is, yes. And I think believe me, people really like, it's one of the best things they ever did. So forth.
Great, thank you. Any other non-agenda items? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item 3. Cycling Without Age Program Educational Update. First, I'll just start off with mentioning Cycling Without Age has been a really incredible program that took off two-ish years ago now. But we'll go into more of the details on timeline, history, and what's coming up. But generally, if you're unaware of the program, it's a social program now throughout the county that enables older adults and those with differing abilities to feel the wind in their hair again, kind of like when they used to ride a bicycle. So really, it connects more people to other people in social ways through basically the vessels, which are tricycle rickshaws. So without me babbling on too much about it, I invited Alder Jennings here to basically update us on Cycling Without Age, because there's some training coming up, there was a name change, and some other things. So, Alder Jennings?
Thank you. Tori Jennings, 1632 Ellis Street, Stevens Point. I am one of the board members, one of the directors of Cycling Without Age. So Cycling Without Age Stevens Point is expanding, as you said, and we now have a new name. We are now Cycling Without Age Portage County, and we now have 4 trishaws. And thanks to the generous support of the Rotary Club of Greater Portage County, we now have a trailer, and we are able to transport the trishaws throughout Portage County. And this gives us a lot more flexibility. And with that, we expect to do more group rides and events this year. And also another feature that we will be expanding in the program this year is being able to go to people's homes to give them rides as long as they have a qualified caregiver to help with the transfer and accompany them on the ride. So Cycling Without Age began in Copenhagen, Denmark in 2012. Our program launched last June 1st, 2018. So this is our second season. Our trishaws are built and shipped from Copenhagen, and they are specially designed for people with limited mobility. And our trained pilots and all of our pilots go through a training program directed by the Wisconsin Bike Fed. Our pilots give rides to people who can basically no longer ride a bike, and the program is geared towards older adults. And I've even given rides to people in their 80s and 90s. Often they're women who grew up on farms, and they've actually never ridden a bike in their life. So that was the first bike ride they ever had, and that was really fun. At the heart of the program, as Commissioner Trevor said, Chair Trevor, it's really a social program, and it's a way of combating loneliness, which is known to have significant negative health effects on people's health and well-being. And there's a large body of literature to talk about this. The other growing body of literature is about how nature, just being in nature, improves quality of life, both mentally, physically, and as well as emotionally. And actually in the UK, Scotland is the first location where physicians can actually prescribe nature as a prescription for improving well-being. Although there's many cultures around the world that have recognized this for a long time. So this is also a part of what Cycling Without Age is getting people out in the fresh air, the sunshine, and being in nature. And the benefits of that were telling for those of us who were pilots, and even individuals with significant dementia. Staff would say that we have anecdotal evidence of they slept better, they were calmer and more alert. So and I'm actually working on a study with Annie Wetter at the university on this to look at our own program. So if anyone is interested in becoming a pilot, our spring training is this Friday and Saturday. So the Friday training session is at 5:30 in this very room at the police department at 933 Michigan Avenue. And then another session is offered at Saturday morning, this Saturday, at 9:00 a.m. in the same location. It's both classroom and practical, about 2.5 hours. So anyone who has not signed up for the training and is interested in becoming a pilot, they can either just show up or contact me at cwa.stevenspoint@gmail.com. So if anyone has any questions or comments to add, yes.
Will there be an opportunity to take trishaws onto the Green Circle Trail where it is not always paved?
Bill Fehrenbach is also a pilot, and he likes the trails, and I worry about the maintenance. However, at a limited level, and because we have the addition of the new Schrader connection, which is right by the Portage County Healthcare Center, which is where one of our trishaws is located, that will be an ideal option for those residents. And just so everyone knows, there are 4 trishaws. One will be at the Portage County Healthcare Center, one is at Brookdale, one is at North Crest on the north side of town, and one is at the ADRC. So from those locations, we can give coverage to a large part of the community, as well as the trailer giving us mobility.
Just thinking, if you want to get them into nature,
Yes.
Green
Yeah.
Circle does it.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
then getting out into some of this slower, more natural county roads also would help, I think. And it looks like you have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah. We're really fortunate with the ADRC being so close to the riverfront trail. And so
Yeah.
we take people right along the river, and that's really to Bucol Park, and they can watch people skate and all that.
And I took a couple of ladies from Northcrest. We had been doing that loop quite a bit.
Yeah.
I thought, let's try. We're so close to Schmeekly, and
Yes.
so I navigated. I think I did it first on my own to make sure it was safe. But the day I took the ladies out, there were deer just right on the trail, and we just stopped, and they were like.
It's
It was
awesome,
pretty
as they
cool.
say.
It
Yeah,
was pretty cool.
that's great.
But that being said, that section of trail is a little more demanding, and we would want to make sure our pilots are well
Strong.
comfortable with that
Okay.
before they would take
Okay.
clients out there.
Well, thank you for taking on this project those years ago and really seeing it through. And our community is definitely better off already, as you pointed out. So, yeah, if you're interested in volunteering for Cycling Without Age, please do sign up. The training's this weekend, so contact Alder Jennings. You want to say that email again one more time, please?
cwa.stevenspoint@gmail.com.
Cool. Thank you, Alder Jennings.
Thank you very much.
All right. We'll move on to the item 4, summary of Division Street Strategic Plan Public Session. So I brought this to the table just to highlight that the Division Street corridor master planning is still current. It's currently continuing. I know Associate Planner Kearns can speak more to this, but I mentioned that there was a public session the 25th of April last week, getting more public feedback on the current planning. There was some large-scale poster images of potential improvements and as far as land use and the street corridor itself, streetscape, as well as users, the modes of transportation. So there's, I think, is this, correct me if I'm wrong, is this sheet available on the website currently, the city website?
I'm not sure if it's up there yet.
Okay.
But I do know that the city does have a dedicated website for this project for both Division Street and the downtown. And it's, again, accessible on the city website and has information on the projects. It has a preliminary presentation from last year, and also will have the presentation that was presented last week up shortly if it's not already up. But the goal is to have that website be the place for the public to obtain a lot of this information including the survey that you have in your hand.
Great, thank you. And is there a deadline for the survey for the public?
As soon as possible. They're looking for the Division Street corridor to have a final draft for us in May. So I would say, the next week or two to get all the survey responses forwarded to the consultant would be appropriate for them to then draft the final version by the end of May.
Okay.
And the same process and protocol will likely occur in June for the downtown portion of the study.
Okay, great. And if there are further questions, I don't know, commissioners, if you had any other feedback?
I was concerned there was a alternate that refers to using alternate routes for the bicycles on Division Street. And I think that would be a mistake, because even though I may not want to bike all the way the length of Division Street on a bicycle facility, certainly if I'm on the side street and coming in, to get to one of the businesses there, I got to go for a half a block. And if we don't have that, I think we really are missing the ball. I think we have to provide some bicycle accommodation in that area. And for my druthers would be that the accommodation be on the street. And the reason I'm concerned about that is there are so many driveways. It's easy to hit a bicyclist if you're looking at a bike trail that's behind the sidewalk. People aren't looking for that when they're entering or exiting a driveway. I think we're going probably have to bite the bullet and have some sort of on-street accommodation. It may not be as comfortable, but I think it'll be safer to have it on street. And I would, at some point when we review the plan, I would like us to address that. And reasonable people can disagree with my judgment, and I'm okay with that, but I feel very strongly that on that location, we have to provide some sort of on-street accommodation at least.
Yeah, speaking to that same subject, I would concur. If I was a business owner, doesn't matter what business, am I really interested in saying, I'm sorry, 5%, 6% of the population, you're not really welcome here? So to me, it's a common sense move to allow all modes of transportation on that corridor. I think the details of figuring that out can be worked out. One
Yes.
example is, put the yield/stop signs prior to
Yes.
the bicycle facility intersection with the driveway. So there's ways around that. We're not used to that, right? But that's a different and newer approach.
And besides the 5 or 6%, we're also making it so that commercial strip is invisible to people who are going to the summer events at the university, because we're going to direct them away from it. And there are a lot of people who come to, especially Suzuki, on bicycles. And if we go to the alternate or something that's a little unfamiliar, I think that we're going to preclude those businesses from taking advantage of those conferences we have during the summer, and where a lot of people come in on bicycles.
Further, the university's actively seeking a new replacement bike share.
Yes.
So probably a non-venture capital company that was interested in profit as the primary and only driving force. So we'll see what the university comes up with and develops there. Any other feedback from the commission or the public on this agenda item? Yes, Commissioner Dugan.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. O'Meara. I too was surprised about the alternate when I took a look at those possibilities. And as a longtime rider, and sometimes on division, but not often, yes, I could certainly use that, rather than using the sidewalk or anything, a bike path that resembles a sidewalk. I could use that on the corridor, road corridor.
Thank you. Any other comments or feedback? Okay, if there are more questions from the public or commission, then please do contact the Community Development Department. I think Kyle or Michael would be much obliged to help. So please contact that department. All right, moving on to the item number 5. Proposal on Portage County countywide bicycle and pedestrian plan prioritization model. So as people that have been following in the public as well as city government staff, most people are fairly aware that we have a robust countywide bike ped plan. And the reason this Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission exists in the first place is because the plan has driven, it's actually a direct recommendation from the plan, and the vision of this commission is to help implement and prioritize the recommendations for the city. So this is basically the next step in prioritization. So because, again, it's so robust, it's not an easy process. It can be confusing, and this is another step in helping us recommend certain recommendations that are already in the plan to the city, directly to Plan Commission, Public Works, or City Council. So on your agenda packet, page 4, you can see the start of a proposal that Commissioner O'Meara and I put together. First, I'll mention there is a correction. And if you look at item 2 and all of the bullet points below that, where you see the number 5, that should actually be a number 10. So I apologize. All of those corrections need to happen to make it make sense. So if you cross out number 5 and all of those bullet points, you will please replace that with the number 10. Are there any initial feedback or updates, suggestions by the commission?
There were two things that I was interested in when we looked at the prioritization plan. One is I would like the members to also rank their top 3 goals as well as giving the scores. And the reason is there are so many choices on goals. You can manipulate which ones win by going to a max minimum scoring deal if you're a member of the committee. And we could have the deal, not unlike our last presidential election, with the one that has the highest aggregate score was in, you could have that and have 2 people give the highest score to 2 goals, but the other 3 people think another goal is a higher score. Just because of the way people score, they give different weight. And I think we should do both of those, because I've done these scoring systems before, and there are ways that either consciously or unconsciously they can be manipulated, that you really don't get what you need. And so I would like each member to rank their top 3 goals in each category. The other thing is I would like them to give a short, very short narrative on each one as to why they are choosing it. The reason is we could have reasons that are legitimate that in our wisdom when we put these together we're not aware of right now. And they could be very good ones. And for instance, one we don't have is crashes. And I'm not proposing we put this in here, but someone could say, yeah, at this particular location, we've had 3 crashes. In fact, I can think of one where that did happen in Stevens Point on Division Street, a little further south, where we put in a signal because there had been a fatality. And I think that So what I would like us to do, each member rank their top 3 goals and give like a couple of sentences as to why they chose them in that order. And,
So the item 1 has that last sentence. Does that
Yes.
cover that?
yes.
Okay, great. Any correction or edits to that
Then I
sentence?
also want them to rank their top 3
Right,
goals.
right, yep.
Can you summarize where that 42 recommendations comes from? 42 recommendations.
Yeah, so
Yes.
basically, if you took, like it says in number 1,
6 commissioners times 7.
7.
Yes.
Yep, so the 7 recommendations per commissioner. Yep. And broken down by what's stated in item 1 here.
Mhm.
Now, that's I think, a simplified version of the original, because you could really get aggressive, but to be realistic, I think it came down to 42, but then, of course, as you work through items 2 and then 3, you end up with a total of 7 final recommendations from this commission. Because not all recommendations are created equal, I had thought that this might be much more realistic. Obviously, again, I think it's 1 is a facility recommendation. So typically, a facility recommendation being the most expensive and most budgetary confining, I think it's pretty realistic to suggest 1 per year out of the 7. I did have a question about timeline for staff and commission. So right at the top, it says every December. When it comes to budgets and planning in general, is that a good time to go through this process as a commission, or would you recommend something else?
You know what we'll do with budget? If we get a budget for pedestrian programs, let's say we have $20,000. We may end up with one suggestion that's a $5,000 fix. So I would hope that we would try to at least get to where the budget is.
Sure.
And so that's why I don't say 1. I say that we'll go to the budget when we do these, and I think we would do that. But the one thing is, in December, you'll know what your budget is. That's one thing. But you're gonna, and that's fine. But your problem is if you don't do it earlier, you have less bargaining as to what you want to put in the budget. And to do that, you'd have to make these recommendations probably in June.
Right, so budgets are essentially milled around in the summer and then fall and then finals in November, I think. Is that correct?
Right, so here's something else to consider. With regards to the model that I presented at the last meeting, at the last 2 meetings, in documenting each goal, recommendation, policy, what partners and stakeholders are involved, what the timeline is. The idea is that the 7 goals that are determined or prioritized via this body will then apply that model to.
Yep.
Some of those goals or objectives, just given the amount of staff time, may be put on hold throughout the year. Some of them may require more of background and analysis to complete those models. So I'm not necessarily worried hugely on the timeline. For example, if you prioritized in June, you might have a final set of recommendations in July. However, the modeling and the background for, let's say, an infrastructure improvement, a bike lane or sidewalk, there might be more involved that may be beyond the budget for that period. So the budget planning would start in July, August, would start getting closer to a final budget in October and then final budget in November. So I don't necessarily think we should place a whole lot of priority on the timeline for the prioritization, because I wouldn't want to see something rush through and, not enough staff time put into the modeling or the documentation needed to further that initiative, versus, just setting a time every year, working through that time, right? Because after 7 goals and objectives are identified, staff can get a better understanding of how they can assist in achieving those, and then start placing timelines to those as well for the coming year or years, rather than, again, trying to hurriedly rush something through so that it gets in that year's budget cycle.
Yeah, I think the intention was, in suggesting December, you have your initial, right, discussion in December at the BPSSC level. And then maybe over 2 months, you're making a recommendation. At the same time, city staff is looking through these discussions, item 3, 4, 5, so like the final goals and objectives, all that stuff, over the next 3 months, and then you're developing your SMART goals, the model you're talking about. So that, by that point, we're talking May, June. So really, it's for the next year.
Right.
Budget cycle, and that was the intention. So it's more of a 1.5 year planning as opposed to
And you could even,
half year.
you could even dial it back to begin in the fall, after we've got bicycle and pedestrian counts, begin maybe in October, so that you have the winter months, where staff typically can devote more time in both community development as well as public works, just given the winter season, might be the best and most crucial time to do some of those modeling, priority
Should we cross out December and make it October?
fact sheets.
Yeah, and, the other thing is, there's nothing saying we have to give the recommendations in each category all at the same time.
Right.
We could decide, let's say we say, gee, I'd really like to have fill in a gap on a sidewalk. We can do that and give DPW enough time if we don't do it in May. If, in fact, we could probably do it if we do it as late as February, but later than that's kind of tough. Because that's when we bid the sidewalk replacement program. And that's generally when it generally wouldn't be a freestanding project. It'd probably be part of that other bid we have, general bid we have for sidewalks, so.
Right. Yeah, they wouldn't be mutually exclusive.
No,
Imagine there'd be staff, just like in previous years, coming to us and saying, what's your recommendation on, the business park, as far as facilities or whatever it might be. Those are gonna keep coming up.
yes.
Yeah.
I do have a couple other comments, if I may.
Yep.
And one is to stress that this is a policy. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that this become adopted and followed as is written, because I think there's some flexibility in the commission being able to respond and take into consideration different criteria when recommending a goal or an objective. That could be something outside of what you've identified. Maybe one of the goals or objectives aligns well with a development project,
Yes.
or an infrastructure improvement already underway, or the new construction of a building, something along those lines. And I wouldn't want, to miss a goal or an objective because it wasn't identified within this policy, isn't following the timeline, wasn't ranked appropriately. So again, stress the fact that it's a policy. This body would then have the opportunity to, not follow it if they deem necessary.
See, that's why I did put in the ranking.
Right. The other thing is the ranking. So my fear is it can get somewhat cumbersome if, we've got 5 commissioners, 6 with the alternate. They're recommending 7 different things. And granted, a lot of them will probably be the same. So you probably wouldn't necessarily recommend or end up with 42 different recommendations. There would probably be many that are the same. But then to have to go through and rank all of them, and then have 6 different rankings for each of those different goals and objectives can be pretty cumbersome. And then to be able to tabulate that as a stats teacher, I know you know, Bill, that then try to relay that back to the commission and identify, here's the rankings. I just sense maybe that's not necessarily needed. And the commission has, can just use its discretion to make that determination on what those 7 goals and objectives are going to be. But that's just, my opinion. While I think it's very beneficial to have a policy in place that can be referenced when reviewing different recommendations in the plan and prioritizing those recommendations, I do have a concern that the ranking might be a little bit too cumbersome.
See, my experience with doing ranking is that we'd have a meeting, and you have a whiteboard, and I would say that at least 50% of the time there's a consensus after the discussion. And then you just send that one in. And you'd probably use this sort of prioritization when you're saying, well, there's a little bit of, so that people feel that they've been heard. But I think that as a practical matter, I think that you'd find out that there would be a consensus on an overwhelming majority. For instance, I don't think that we would find anybody who would say, we're going to eliminate cycling without age. That's just never going to happen. And we're going to say it's important in most of our, goals. But there are other ones that would be a little, and I don't think, on safe routes to school, I don't think you'd say, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore.
Sure.
And so I think that this goes to when you have a close call, and I think you'd end up doing it like on 1 or 2 maybe.
Okay.
So maybe that needs to be outlined here
Yeah, I mean,
more
that's
specifically.
good to know that if a consensus can be drawn prior to ranking, that be the protocol or procedure that's primarily utilized. Whereas if there's difficulty in determining a few
Yes.
in different subjects, whether it's enforcement or education, that then maybe they are ranked
Yes.
utilizing that approach. The last concern I have is that I don't necessarily think when this body determines the 7 recommendations, they need to be confirmed by council. What I do think needs to happen is after a recommendation goes through the modeling, goes through the analysis, city staff has worked through, what partners are involved, what the timeline is. I think at that point, especially if there's dollars required, then it's a recommendation that's forwarded to common council for approval with that subsequent documentation along with the recommendation. But I think at the end of this policy, I just think, getting common council to confirm that the Bicycle Pedestrian Street Safety Committee can focus on these 7 items probably is an unnecessary step.
And I think that we're probably stronger if we just say, these are our 7 goals. The Common Council can decide to go along with them or not, but we won't change our goals because they don't go along with it. We still will have them.
And then when it comes to what you're saying, when it comes
Yeah.
to budgetary concerns
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
policy that needs to shift, whether
Yes.
it's like complete streets or something, then obviously it needs to go to council.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think it's important that we keep our goals, because I can foresee councils that wouldn't think that we were as important as other councils. And I think that one of the powers of this commission is to say that this is important stuff, and we shouldn't give up our mission because we happen to be with a council that doesn't think it's as important.
Say it ain't so. Commissioner Dugan?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about perhaps not giving this information to council sooner.
Well, I think that, sorry to interrupt.
Well, I understand it'll be given
Yeah.
to us. Nonetheless, there are people, perhaps even a new one, would not agree. But I just think council needs to get on board as early as we can get it on board, and then to follow through when we have the plans and when we have the modeling. And I've worked with Public Works quite a bit on filling in the gaps, the sidewalk gaps, and I intend to continue that in terms of safe routes to school in my district. But in whatever way we can do it, I think council needs to know ahead of time and needs to be on board. And do we need to vote sooner rather than later?
See, I don't want the council to be able to vote, because what that does is it makes it seem that the goal that this commission gives is not legitimate.
Mm.
I'm saying that our goal, the goals we have are legitimate,
Oh, yeah.
and the council can choose to go along with them or not.
Well, first, they're already approved through the bike ped plan.
They
I
are.
think maybe I wonder if the resolution here, or the resolve is, we're talking about a couple different things. One is, we're figuring out our goals, and then are provided in a report, memo, or
Yes.
presentation to council. And then when it comes to actual recommendations that are affecting policy or budget,
Yeah.
those are obviously going to be brought forth to
Yes.
council.
And on council, I would probably use that 3 minutes of non-agenda time to just bring that up. This has been
Sure.
presented, and let's all take a look at that. Because I've had a lot of pushback on different items from bike ped in my district, and I want as much strength as we can get from the council in whatever way we can get.
We're a
Because-
commission of the city council. We get to be on the agenda and give reports ourselves. We don't have to go to the 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Let third parties go to the 3 minutes. But we are a commission, we report directly to the council. And I don't, when we go to 3 minutes, what we're doing is giving up the legitimacy of this body.
yeah, I understand.
So,
I would just do it a second time as a 3-minuter.
oh, sure, a reminder, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Commissioner Fairbach, did you have any other feedback? Further feedback, Kyle, or anyone from the audience have feedback on this prioritization? Go ahead. Please name and address.
Tim McKnight, 2101 Oak Street. I agree. I think what I think you're trying to say is, yes, I would not report it to the Common Council either, or the Plan Commission. And for most of the time I've been to the Plan Commission and some of the meetings I've been at, I think that you have to, if they're not a biker of any, or not just any kind of biker, it sometimes, they might take it wrong. And then because it's part of the deal when you're a biker and you come to the meeting, you don't see a lot of people here come. That's why you don't do something like Mr. O'Meara's right, because that's exactly what you're supposed, you don't want to go to the common, bring up something like she said too, and yes, I agree, especially.
Thanks for sharing your input. Yep. So I think, taking all the feedback that came from commission staff and the audience, we'll come back to this again next month. Do a little reworking of this draft. If that sounds all right. Okay? Sure. Sounds good. We shall move on to the next agenda item, which would be item 6. As part of the comprehensive plan, the transportation chapter is a final draft for us to review. And I think, Associate Planner Kearns has brought up the draft on the screen here. We have a minimized version of the screen just for fun, just to make you squint more. Now, I guess there's some tech problems. So if you can see that, great. If not, it is in the packet, starting on page 7 of the packet. So I don't know if you want to go ahead and introduce
Sure.
this, Kyle?
So, the comprehensive plan, all 10 chapters are in the final stages and are nearing adoption, hopefully within the next 30 days. The idea and intent is to, one, have staff review. Staff is in the final stages of thoroughly reviewing everything. We had asked the consultant to provide updated information. Because this process has been going on so long, some of the earlier information in these earlier chapters, like transportation and housing, was from earlier sources, from 2014, 2015, and because now we're in 2019, we'd asked for a lot of those sources to reflect a more present time period. However, we also asked them to reformat the goals and objectives. So a lot of this has been seen by this body before, maybe not the same commissioners, but at least has been before this body before. Recommendations, a lot were made from this group, and they were reflected by the consultant and staff. Those changes were made. What this body has not necessarily seen at this point are the goals and objectives related to specifically transportation. So I'm trying to bring those up on the screen. They can be found at the end of the chapter. And while we're looking for any feedback throughout this chapter, I think the primary focus that we would recommend is on these goals and objectives. Have we, included, what we think is most relevant in the next planning period with these goals, objectives, and policies? And are there some that are missing? Keep in mind that city staff will be utilizing this document as a living document. Every year, we will be thoroughly combing through the comprehensive plan to identify those goals and objectives and policies that have been met, and then removing those and introducing new goals and objectives. So just because there might not be a goal or objective in the plan now, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be out of the plan for the next 20 years. Because again, the idea is for staff to annually update the goals and objectives relating to this plan, not necessarily the bulk of the other material in the plan, just the goals, objectives, and policies. And you can see the approach we've taken on the screen here and on pages 29 and 30, which show the goal, show the objectives underneath that goal, the specific policies, what chapters they exist in, level of priority, the timeline, cost, and or what partners or city departments are involved. So again, I would ask for any feedback when it comes to formatting and spelling and grammar. I wouldn't look at that heavily because a lot of that will be addressed by city staff. We will format the entire document once it's ready for formatting and do a spell check of the entire document.
Okay. Thanks for the introduction and overview. I guess I will start off with one, even though it's not in the the primary section you want us to focus on. There's a language concern I have, and that's with using the words alternative modes of transportation. I know it's been pretty standard in transportation and land use planning for literally decades, maybe a century, to call walking or biking alternative. However, I would suggest we change that to either non-motorized or reword it some way. And there's two reasons. One is an interesting one from the years of 1 or 2 years old. Most humans walk. So to consider that an alternative mode is really funny. So we all walk, or most of us do walk when we are a child. So that's really our primary mode of transportation throughout life. So that's one. The second one is really about marginalization. So if we continue to push walking, bicycling, even transit into the alternative category, we continue to marginalize that community. So I think it's kind of unnecessary to, again, you can look at documents around the country, some around the world that will still use this, but I think it's pretty dated. So that's a language recommendation I have. And I know it's mentioned a bunch of times here, so. Commissioner O'Meara.
On objective 8.3, I would add another policy that we're going to keep track of crash and injury data on the pedestrian and bicycle system.
Do you think that would, the column of lead department would first be PD and then community development and public works? What are you thinking with?
This is the problem. PD does not keep track of people falling on the sidewalk when there's a defect in the sidewalk. And it probably will be community development, and they may have to go and ask, the emergency room or something. It's a tough deal, but we want to know if people are getting injured on our facilities.
Thank you.
And then I had two that were in the existing. On page 18 of 30, trails. I would change the sentence because we say there are over 300 miles of snowmobiles and many other trail activities located through Stevens Point area, including snowshoeing. I would say there are 300 miles of trails located including, and then put snowshoeing with, or snowmobiling in with the other uses. It's not a preferred use as far as I'm concerned.
I second that emotion.
And then, on autonomous vehicles, on page 23, one of the cons on autonomous vehicles right now is right now there's an inability of autonomous vehicles to recognize pedestrians and bicyclists. And they're going to have to take care of that before they're adapted. I would put it under, on the top of 23, the end of that, some of the cons and technology, increased vehicles, privacy, convenience. I would put a sentence about the inabilities so far. In fact, there have been 2 fatalities during the testing of pedestrians and bicyclists that the autonomous vehicles didn't see. The other thing with autonomous vehicles, there's another con is the inability to operate in bad weather, especially heavy rain or snow. Not that they won't be solved, but those are 2 cons that they're having right now. And those conclude my suggestions.
Thank you.
My suggestions on the goals and objectives is under the lead department. Perhaps give us, for those who are not quite as well-versed in city departments, a legend for what all the abbreviations.
And we do have a legend for
Somewhere.
the executive summary, but I
Okay.
will be sure to carry that legend through each chapter.
Thank you.
Nice.
And then on page 13 of 30, under bicycle facilities, you make the mention of the BPAC created in 2015. Perhaps we could add that the Street Safety Commission was added whenever it was added.
What page is that on?
2019.
13 of 30 is
Okay.
68 of it.
Yeah, I believe in my version, so this is the version that was provided to, from the consultant to us.
Okay.
I have several updates. I believe that's one of them.
Good.
The bronze award is also one of them, to have that corrected.
I think I saw that in there. You had
Is
both years.
Did I? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
But I will still make a note of it.
Okay.
More feedback, updates from commissioners?
Again, if you want to have more of a, I guess, intimate conversation about this, you're more than welcome to stop in the office or schedule an appointment with me, and we can go over things additionally, rather than taking the commission's time here.
Are there any major, we'll correct it, major implications, changes to this chapter?
No, I thought it was very well done.
Thank you, thank you. Anyone from the audience besides the, yep, please name and address.
Troy Jennings, 1632 Ellis Street. I want to thank the commission and Mr. Kearns for all the work that has gone into this. It's a lot. I am glad to see the achieve a higher status of a bicycle-friendly community from the League of American Bicyclists. And I was with many of you here when we worked on that the first time. And time flies, right? 2020 is just around the corner. And just as a prompt, it'd be good to visit what needs to be done now. And just letting the public know that the criteria of becoming a bicycle-friendly community, whether it's bronze, silver, gold, or platinum, achieving that requires that the city actually do the things that are there. So it's a really good guide. It's like the Portage County-wide bicycle and pedestrian plan. It's a guide on what needs to be done. And I think just having been part of this before, this needs to be visited now in terms of what has been done, what has been achieved. I think the TAP grant is going to be a huge one, but we have the feedback. The city has the feedback on what needed to change, why we didn't get the higher status when we applied last time. And if we don't make those changes, we're still going to be at bronze for another 4 years. And the point was to try to get a higher status. So, thank you.
Thank you. And just to add to that Alder Jennings is referring to Goal 8, Objective 8.2, so that's on page 29 in the packet. Policy 83, so achieving a higher status as a bike-friendly community from the League of American Bicyclists, thereby improving awareness for bicycles and pedestrians on roadways. So that's the overall policy. However, I'll add to that, the league has provided the city specifically with the report, and the report is very similar to the bike ped plan. It's like you have to do X, Y, and Z if you're serious about getting to the next level. So it makes a lot of sense. Any other feedback from the audience? Commissioners, back to you? No? Okay. Do we need a motion to approve this chapter, or are you just taking feedback today?
I think we're just taking feedback today. This will certainly go out for the public comment period, as well as Plan Commission and Common Council. We will likely do a final draft rather than individual chapters. We'll just have a final draft and likely have an open house style format for the public, and then hopefully go to Plan Commission and Common Council for approval within the next month.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item then. The item 7, Complete Streets Policy Next Steps. So as most everyone here is aware, we have a resolution that was passed by City Council earlier this year. And, resolutions are general overarching statements which guide the city on next steps and path to achieving certain things listed in the resolution. However, Complete Streets can be much more robust, and as pointed out in the staff memo on page 2, I'll just actually read that because it's short and sweet. So with the comprehensive plan project near completion and the zoning code rewrite project anticipated for completion by the end of the year, staff would recommend waiting to create a complete street policy/ordinance. A resolution on complete streets was adopted recently, which will serve to ensure all modes of transportation are accounted for in street design within the city. Furthermore, the comprehensive plan has several goals, objectives, and policies that provide direction for achieving a more functional street. Lastly, the zoning code rewrite should produce a document that outlines standards for subdivision standards, including road construction. When taking all this into consideration, it may be best to wait until the above projects are finished before trying to draft any additional complete streets document to ensure there is no overlap and be able to address areas of weakness. So really, moving forward, that makes sense to me.
Yes, I was going to say here, here.
Here. So I had this discussion with Director Badoon as well as Associate Planner Kearns, and we were all in agreement that this made sense. Are there any questions or comments from the commission?
I think that's good, because then in the document we have, we could refer back to those ordinances in our document, so that we show that our complete streets document is very much in, missing the word.
Incongruence or?
In line with
In
other
line-
city.
In line with the other ones, that we're not, what we're doing is, we're restating what is spread out all over the municipal code.
Right.
And I think that that's important for people to figure out, that this isn't some radical, out-of-the-box thing. This stuff has already been discussed, been debated, and we're bringing it all together so people see how the municipal code fits together.
And I agree with that. Nonetheless, however, I would advise the commission to do their research within the last memo, or
Yes.
within the last agenda. There was a memo that had several links to different documents, different community examples regarding complete streets policy, what they can do for a community, the different formats they can exist in, whether by ordinance, resolution, other municipal code. And so I think it's good for this body to get a good handle on
Yes.
what they can do, why they exist, how other communities are using them, especially in Wisconsin, so that when we're ready to take that next step in the coming months, perhaps at the end of the year, you guys are well
We're all set.
informed about complete streets and their function and how communities utilize them.
Makes sense. In other words, do your homework. Cool. Anyone else with feedback or questions, comments? Audience? No? Okay. All right, move on to the next item, staff update. Kyle, did you have anything else besides?
I do not have
comp
anything,
or
no.
zoning? No? Okay.
And we can't adjourn because we have no
gavel?
item for adjournment.
No item for adjournment.
I apologize.
You're
All right.
allowed to say, there being no further business, this
Oh, actually, we do.
commission is adjourned.
We need to amend the agenda, I'm just kidding.
No, you
All right,
don't.
there's no further business.
memo, not on the
This
agenda.
item, this agenda is
This meeting is
adjourned. This meeting's adjourned.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.